Are you concerned about the perils of polarization? Then you've come to the right podcast. This is A Bit of Purple, a bonus episode from The Purple Principle, and I'm Robert Pease, creator and producer of the podcast. Our guest today is Dr. Dominik Stecula, an expert on political science and media at Colorado State University. Our topic is broadcast journalism, which 40 years ago may have been less entertaining, but on balance, more fact-based, objective, and informative.
Today's OPEC increases are expected to drive the price of unleaded up to a national average of 77 cents per gallon.
Day 142 of the Iran hostage crisis. And the Shah's arrival in Egypt complicates efforts to free the hostages.
Unexpected release of more radiation today from the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant has led to a series of consequences.
Unless you've been living in a cave without cable, you've noticed that broadcast journalism has changed.
Once again, another police chase.
It's a non-story. It's a non-story.
Well, every time I get done with the 7-day, you guys are like, oh.
We know all too well you can't please everyone. That's a fact if you work in the news business.
Are you kidding me?
What the heck happened? We posed this question to Dr. Stecula, who pursued his postdoctoral research on this topic at UPenn's Annenberg School of Communications.
I think what contributed to this process has been definitely the fact that all news just got a lot more political and a lot more partisan. What happened is that back in the late 70s, early 80s, if you were following the news, roughly a third of the time you would encounter like a reference to a politician or a quote from a politician. So 1 in 3 stories, roughly. Now, fast forward to the mid-90s, we're now at 56%. Majority of content is now partisan. Fast forward to 2016, now it's 2/3, it's 67%. So now, essentially, it's not just people who are in the echo chambers who are exposed to hyperpartisanship. It's everybody that even residually follows the news. And, that turns off a lot of people, especially the kind of pure independents who are going to get turned off by politics.
Dr. Stecula, an expert on news and media consumption, has paid close attention to how audience responses evolve along with this changing media landscape.
Back in the 60s, 70s, essentially, if you had the television on in the evening, it was on one of the 3 channels and the news was on. And regardless of which of the 3 channels you watched, you were more or less served the same content. So everybody was more or less on the same page. Now you have a lot of outlets out there and there's fierce competition and the news audiences have fragmented quite a bit.
And the easiest, most economical way to attract audiences is to make news less fact-based, more emotional, and more entertaining.
There's this political scientist, Eitan Hirsch, and he has this concept of political hobbyism. And people kind of engage with politics as they do with sports, right? It's just kind of this shallow kind of pursuit of entertainment and gratification. And I think a lot of partisans are like that. And a lot of independents, on the other hand, like we've been talking about, they get turned off by this.
Over this same period of national cable news becoming more partisan and entertainment-driven, local news sources have either declined or consolidated.
If you look at trust in the news has been decreasing since the 70s, but trust in the local news has been much higher than trust in national news. So, when these sources that people trust at relatively higher levels than national sources do disappear, that's problematic. Another problematic development has been that a lot of local news stations have been bought up by the Sinclair Group. And Sinclair has been running essentially like a fairly partisan operation. So when there was this kind of hardcore partisan content masquerading as local news, I think that's not particularly good either.
So where can an independent-minded audience find nonpartisan, fact-based news these days?
Most people don't really think very hard about these distinctions. And I think there's just been a lot of just news that has been sounding more like opinion, and there's just been a proliferation of opinion content. even if there was some benevolent billionaire who was like funding some news outlet. I have a hard time imagining that surviving in the long term.
You've been listening to A Bit of Purple with today's guest, Dr. Dominik Stecula, Associate Professor of Political Science at Colorado State University and an expert on American broadcast media. The Purple Principle is a podcast about the perils of partisanship in media, politics, society, and just plain everyday life. This is Robert Pease for the Purple Principle team, with original music by Ryan Adair Rooney. Look for full episodes and more bonus material on your favorite streaming service. Please share us on social media and find more info at purpleprinciple.com.